Part 1. The collapse before the climb. It begins when everything falls apart. Not gradually, not softly, but like a wave crashing through the center of your life, erasing everything you thought was solid. The job, the relationship, the belief, the identity. One day you wake up and realize that the person you were no longer exists, and you're not sure who's left behind. That's where we begin today. In the silence after the storm, in the ruins of what used to be, in the space where the old self has died and the new self hasn't yet been born. You're not alone in this. Elizabeth Gilbert has walked this road. And in her words, ruin is a gift. Ruin is the road to transformation. At first, you don't want to hear that. You want the old life back. You want what was familiar, even if it wasn't perfect. You want someone to hand you a map, a timeline, an answer. But there are no shortcuts here. There is only the raw, sacred truth of being lost. And being lost, Gilbert reminds us, is not the same as being broken. Embrace the glorious mess that you are, she says. Because the mess isn't the end of the story, it's the compost from which something extraordinary can grow. So how do we begin again when the flood has taken everything? First, we stop pretending that we're okay. That's the first soul-level mistake we make. We fake our way through grief. But pretending to be okay is not strength. It's fear. And fear, when left unexamined, becomes a prison. Gilbert says, fear is always triggered by creativity, because creativity asks you to enter into realms of uncertain outcome. And beginning again is the most creative act of all. You are creating yourself, not polishing the old version, but starting from pure, trembling, sacred zero. This is where the philosophy gets real, because the ego will tell you to rebuild what you lost, to prove something, to show the world you're fine. But the soul whispers a different invitation. The soul says, slow down, wait, rest, breathe. This is not the time to rebuild the old, it's the time to receive what wants to be built through you. And that requires surrender. Elizabeth Gilbert writes in Big Magic, you do not need anybody's permission to live a creative life. The same applies to a spiritual life. A reborn life. You don't need permission to start again. You just need presence. Sometimes the first step is not action. It's observation. Watch yourself. Watch the sadness, the numbness, the resistance. Watch the way your body tightens when you think about the future. Don't judge it. Just witness it. Because when you become the observer, you step outside the storm. You begin to see that you are not the pain, you are the awareness that holds the pain. Gilbert's journey in Eat, Pray, Love started exactly here in the dark. Crying on a bathroom floor, begging for answers. And the answer came in a whisper, go back to the beginning.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
So let me ask you a question that may shake you. What if this collapse is not the end of your life, but the invitation to finally live it? What if the old life had to be washed away because it was too small for who you're becoming? What if the pain is not punishment, but prophecy? That's the power of beginning again. It makes philosophers out of us. It makes mystics out of skeptics. Because when the old story dies, we are forced to ask, who am I now? And is it possible that who I am now is closer to the truth? Elizabeth Gilbert's words echo like a bell through this process. You have to participate relentlessly in the manifestation of your own blessings. That doesn't mean forcing. It means choosing. Choosing not to shrink. Choosing not to numb. Choosing not to disappear. It means showing up messy, confused, afraid, and saying, "I'm still here." That's the first act of resurrection. Not clarity, not confidence, just presence. Just staying. We often wait for motivation to begin again. But Gilbert teaches us that inspiration is not a lightning bolt, it's a discipline. It's a practice. She says, done is better than good. And beginning again doesn't need to be graceful. It just needs to be honest. You don't need a 5-year plan. You need to take one honest breath, one honest step, one honest decision to not give up on yourself. Here's another truth we avoid. Sometimes what's gone is never coming back. The marriage won't be repaired. The person won't return. The dream won't be realized the way you imagined. And that's brutal, but also beautiful. Because when the old dream dies, you're given space to dream again differently, more truthfully. Gilbert's journey through heartbreak didn't end with her crawling back to who she was. It ended with her becoming someone she had never dared to be. There's a hidden danger in trying to begin again too quickly. You skip the integration. You rush past the grief. But real transformation requires digestion. You must feel the weight of what was lost, not to suffer, but to metabolize it, to extract the wisdom. Because nothing is wasted, not even the pain. Gilbert reminds us that the universe buries strange jewels deep within us all, and sometimes it takes the earthquake to unearth them. So don't resent the wreckage. Search it. There are treasures there. Use this moment as a sacred threshold, a rite of passage. You are not who you were. You don't need to be. Let the world fall away. Let the noise fade. Come back to the simplest truths. You are alive. You are breathing. You are capable of creating something new, not in spite of the loss, but because of it. That's the paradox. The greatest art, the deepest love, the most meaningful lives, they are born from the ashes, not the ease. Gilbert's philosophy invites us into radical permission, to live without guarantees, to love without conditions, to create without approval. She writes, you can measure your worth by your dedication to your path, not by your successes or failures. That's the anchor. That's the compass. When life washes everything away, the only thing you can truly reclaim is your path. Not the outcome, not the applause, just the path. And that is more than enough. So now we stand on this edge together. You, me, and every soul who has ever felt stripped bare by life. And we ask the ancient question, what now? Not with fear, but with reverence, with sacred curiosity. What now? What wants to emerge? What part of you is still whispering, I'm not done yet? Part 2, rebuilding the self you never knew. So here we are standing at the edge of the old life, staring into the mystery of what comes next. You've survived the collapse. You've sat in the silence. You've resisted the urge to rush. And now, something begins to stir. Not certainty, not a plan, something quieter, something real. A whisper, not a roar. You are still here. And that whisper is the voice of your becoming. Elizabeth Gilbert calls it the voice of curiosity. It's not dramatic. It doesn't shout. But it's the exact place where your new life begins. Most of us think we need confidence to start over. But Gilbert dismantles that myth with love and precision. She writes, "Forget passion. Follow your curiosity." That's the key. Not a grand vision, not a perfect plan, but the courage to follow the smallest threads of interest, no matter how fragile they feel. You don't need to know who you're becoming. You only need to be willing to explore. And that exploration is the foundation of your rebirth. So here's a question that can reorganize your entire inner world. What if you don't need to find yourself but create yourself? Gilbert reminds us that identity isn't static. It's art. It's architecture. It's clay. And when life washes everything away, it doesn't mean you're lost. It means you've been given a blank canvas. The tragedy is too many of us stare at that blankness in fear, when we should be picking up the brush and saying, "Let's see what's possible now." This is where we meet the most powerful concept in Gilbert's philosophy, creative living. Not in the sense of becoming an artist or writing a book, but in reclaiming your right to live as though your life itself is a work of art. That means you get to experiment. You get to follow odd impulses. You get to change your mind. You get to be bad at things and do them anyway. You're not required to save the world with your creativity, she says in Big Magic. You're only required to save yourself. What might your healing look like if it was an act of play, not pressure? Let's go deeper. Most of us rebuild our lives around what we think is safe. We chase stability, approval, familiarity. But Gilbert invites us to a wilder path. She teaches that safety is not the soil in which the soul thrives, aliveness is. And aliveness requires risk. It requires uncertainty. It requires you to do things you've never done before. Not to impress anyone. Not to prove anything. But simply to feel your own pulse again. Are you willing to lose control in order to feel fully alive? It's at this point that fear tries to reclaim you. Gilbert knows this intimately. She writes, "Fear will always be there, but it doesn't get to drive the car." That's the metaphor of your second life. Fear can ride along. It can speak, but it doesn't decide. Will you decide? And the decision is this: will you let fear write the next chapter, or will you let wonder? Will you let trauma dictate your identity, or will you let creativity shape it? One of the most profound moments in Gilbert's personal journey came when she stopped asking, "What do I want to do?" and started asking, "What feels honest right now?" That's the question that rewrites your life. What feels honest? Not what looks good. Not what makes sense. Not what will make others approve. But what feels like truth in your bones, even if it terrifies you. You don't need to leap into a new identity. You just need to take the next honest step. This is where the work becomes spiritual, not in a religious sense, but in the sense that it demands full presence. To create a new life, you must learn to live close to your inner world, to listen to the subtle signals, to notice what you notice. Gilbert calls this the hunt for enchantment, not fantasy, not escapism, but the subtle magic of following what lights you up. When you pay attention to what feels alive, you begin to stitch yourself back together not with rules, but with wonder. Here's something else we often forget. You are allowed to surprise yourself. Elizabeth Gilbert says, "You have treasures hidden within you, extraordinary treasures, and so do I, and so does everyone around us." But we rarely give ourselves permission to discover them. We think we already know who we are. But the truth is, we've barely begun to meet ourselves. And beginning again is not just about healing, it's about meeting the parts of you that were buried under survival, roles, expectations, and fear. Let me ask you a question, one that may not have an easy answer. What part of you have you never allowed to exist? The dreamer? The mystic? The explorer? The sensual being? The artist? What version of you had to die so you could fit into the life you just lost? And what if that version is now rising from the wreckage not as a ghost, but as a guide? Reinvention doesn't mean fixing yourself. It means returning to your wholeness. It means remembering that you are already complete, even in your confusion. Gilbert says, you are allowed to be both a masterpiece and a work in progress simultaneously. That's the paradox we live in. You don't have to wait until you're healed to live. You live, and the healing happens through the living. There's a sacred intensity in this part of the journey. Some days you'll feel electric with possibility. Other days you'll feel like a child learning how to walk again. That's okay. That's the rhythm of rebirth. And Gilbert teaches us to make space for all of it. Joy, grief, confusion, clarity. Emotional motion sickness is part of the process, she jokes. But underlying that humor is a profound truth. Growth is not linear. It's a spiral, a dance, a storm and a sunrise, often in the same day. And here's the final key. Let yourself be seen. Rebirth is not meant to happen in hiding. Gilbert speaks of the importance of tribe, of finding people who can witness your becoming without judgment. People who don't need you to have it all figured out. People who celebrate your experiments and honor your breakdowns. You don't need a crowd. You need a few sacred mirrors. People who reflect back your light when you forget it's there. As we close this part of the journey, return to this truth. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are not late. You are rising. You are becoming. And the life that's meant for you is not a copy of the old one. It's something entirely new. Something that only you can live. Elizabeth Gilbert writes, we must risk delight. And maybe that's the most radical act of all, to choose delight, even after devastation. Part 3, walking into the sacred unknown. So you've survived the collapse. You've started to pick up the pieces. You've dared to follow curiosity into the wilderness of becoming. But now comes the most delicate, most sacred part of the journey, walking into the unknown with your new self. Because beginning again isn't just about surviving pain. It's about protecting the life that's growing from it. And this part of the path is rarely talked about. It's not loud. It doesn't get applause. But it's everything. Because what you do after the awakening determines whether you stay free or slip back into the prison you just escaped. Elizabeth Gilbert teaches us that the creative life, the awakened life, is not something you visit. It's something you inhabit. And to inhabit it, you need boundaries. Why? because the world will constantly try to pull you back into who you used to be. People will expect the old version of you. They may not recognize this gentler, braver, more soulful person you're becoming. That's okay. Gilbert writes, you have to learn how to care about what people think of you and then stop caring. And let that land. It means you can feel the discomfort of disapproval and still choose your truth. This is where we build the muscle of sovereignty, the ability to say no, to say yes, to say this is who I am now, and I don't owe anyone an explanation. It sounds simple, but it's the most radical act of self-respect. Gilbert reminds us that your life is a sacred project, and not everyone gets a say in how it's built. So ask yourself, who are you still performing for? Who are you still seeking permission from? And what would your life look like if you stopped? To protect your new path, you must also protect your energy. Not in the trendy, superficial sense, but in the deepest, most spiritual way. You are not a machine. You are not here to grind or prove or hustle back to worthiness. You are here to feel, to create, to connect. Gilbert says, don't abandon yourself. That's the only sin. And abandoning yourself can look like overworking, over-explaining, over-pleasing. You don't need to prove your healing to anyone. You just need to live it. One of Elizabeth's most profound ideas is that life doesn't owe you certainty, and you don't owe life perfection. What you owe is participation, presence, willingness. She writes, you're afraid to surrender because you don't want to lose control. But you never had control. All you had was anxiety. That's the truth we all resist. We think the unknown is dangerous. But often, the unknown is where the soul finally breathes. Can you make peace with not knowing? Can you walk forward without a map? This is where faith, not religious faith, but existential courage enters the room. Faith that you are being guided, even when the path is unclear. Faith that your desires matter. Faith that your life is unfolding exactly as it needs to. Gilbert speaks of this as a divine collaboration between you and the mystery. She says, the universe buries strange jewels deep within us all, and then stands back to see if we can find them. That's what this is. The treasure hunt, not for gold, but for soul. Let's talk about joy. Because joy is often the first thing we sacrifice in survival mode. We think joy is irresponsible, frivolous, even selfish. But Gilbert flips that script. She says joy is holy. She says joy is resistance. She says you have every right to a beautiful life. And beginning again means reclaiming the right to feel good, and to laugh, to dance, to create without needing a reason. Joy is not a reward for healing. It is the healing. But joy must be chosen. It won't knock on your door. You have to make space for it, prioritize it, protect it. That might mean starting your mornings in silence, or going for walks without your phone, or painting badly, or writing love letters to yourself. This isn't self-help. It's soul maintenance. Because when you nourish your joy, you become magnetic. Your life starts to bloom in ways you couldn't have predicted. And here's something else. You don't need to be healed to be helpful. Too many of us wait to be perfect before we share our voice, before we serve, before we love again. But Gilbert says you are allowed to be both broken and whole at the same time. That's what makes you human. So stop waiting to be finished. You are not a product. You are a process. And your process is sacred. Let me ask you a question that might change everything. What if your pain wasn't a detour, but the exact route you needed to take? What if your breakdown wasn't the end, but the invitation? What if you didn't lose your path, you found it, in the rubble of what you thought your life should be? This is the wisdom Elizabeth Gilbert weaves through all her writing. The heart knows. The soul whispers. And if you are quiet enough, brave enough, still enough, you'll hear it. The call to begin again. Not because you failed, but because you evolved. And now, this life is too small for you. You are being summoned by something larger, something deeper, something that doesn't speak in logic, but in longing. To walk into the unknown is to trust your longing, to follow the ache, not avoid it. Gilbert calls this the curiosity-driven life. And curiosity will never lead you astray. It may lead you through strange places, uncomfortable conversations, unexpected detours, but it will also lead you home to a self you couldn't have imagined, but always secretly hoped was real. So what does it look like to begin again, fully? It looks like letting go of timelines. It looks like asking better questions. It looks like choosing rest over proving. It looks like creating without an audience. It looks like forgiving yourself even when others won't. It looks like trusting that the life meant for you will find you when you finally stop pretending. Elizabeth Gilbert doesn't offer easy answers, but she offers something better: permission. Permission to start small, to live softly, to fail beautifully, to begin again as many times as it takes. It's a simple and generous rule of life, she says, that whatever you practice, you will become. So practice gentleness, practice truth, practice wonder, and watch what you become. As we end this journey together, I want you to remember one last thing. You are not rebuilding the old self. You are becoming someone entirely new, not in spite of what happened to you, but because of it. And that is not weakness. That is sacred transformation. So breathe in. Feel your feet on the ground. The storm has passed. The world is quiet. And the next chapter is waiting. Ask yourself, what is the most loving thing I can do for myself today?